Snow swept across the training field in long, ghostly ribbons, stinging against the armored suits of the Galactic Coalition recruits. Beyond the perimeter lights, the mountains rose like frozen fortresses, their peaks glowing faintly under the pale blue light of the twin moons. The air was thin, the temperature cruel, and the silence between gusts of wind carried a weight that made even veterans uneasy. This world, designated Hadian 9, was meant to test endurance as much as coordination. Yet the true test had not yet arrived. Sergeant Trell of the Vraken Commandos flexed his scaled fingers around his plasma rifle, watching the last transport ship descend through the snowstorm. Another warm blood, he muttered. His language clicked with disdain. Around him, soldiers from half a dozen worlds murmured in their own tongues. The heliosynth officers adjusted their glowing visors. The Osari, tall and silver-skinned, folded their wings tight against the wind. Every species present prided itself on discipline and technological superiority, and all awaited the rumored newcomer, a human. When the transport settled, the ramp hissed open, and a single figure stepped into the cold. The soldier's armor was mottled gray and brown, patterned for concealment rather than display. He wore a hood lined with synthetic fur and goggles that mirrored the moon's light. No sleek plasma rifle gleamed at his side, only a long, dark weapon of wood and steel slung over his shoulder. The murmurs rose immediately. "That thing fires chemical projectiles," one heliosynth scoffed. "An explosive stick and a lump of metal." "Barbaric. Outdated by 3 centuries," added another. "Does his world not afford proper arms?" The human ignored them. He trudged across the snow, boots sinking deep, and reported to the commanding officer with crisp precision. "Lieutenant Mason Hale, Earth Expeditionary Corps, reporting for Joint Combat Readiness Exercise." His voice was steady, a low tone that cut through the wind without effort. Captain Lurith, a tall Osari, regarded him with polite confusion. Human technology is not typically fielded in coalition operations. "You brought that." Hale unslung the rifle and checked the chamber with practiced ease. M14 pattern. Modified for low temperature and high altitude use. Reliable enough. He met Lurith's gaze without flinching. "I'll manage." Laughter rippled through the group. Even Trell allowed himself a hissing chuckle. "You'll manage until the first drone cuts you in half." Hale gave no reaction. He knelt beside a crate, checked his ammunition, and wiped snow from the weapon's barrel. The simplicity of his motions contrasted sharply with the others' constant fidgeting with their energy cells and heat regulators. There was a stillness to him, a composure that looked almost primitive beside the glowing suits and humming gear around him. "Your species," said the heliosynth officer, his voice modulated by a translator implant, "is known for improvisation. But surely even improvisation has limits." "Only if you believe machines can solve every problem," Hale replied. He stood, brushing snow from his gloves. "We don't." The officers exchanged glances, uncertain whether to be insulted or amused. Lurith raised a hand, ending the debate. "Enough. The exercise begins at dawn. Drones will simulate an enemy ambush along Hadian Ridge. Standard survival rules apply. Adapt, coordinate, and overcome. Let's see if humanity's minimalism can contribute to victory." As the others dispersed to prepare, Hale remained by the perimeter, gazing into the dark horizon. The snow thickened, and the wind rose into a low, distant howl that could have been mistaken for machinery. Somewhere beyond the ridge, dormant combat drones waited for activation. He rested the rifle across his knees, its metal cold but familiar beneath his gloves. Around him, alien lights glimmered in the storm like distant stars, and laughter echoed faintly through the calms. Hale smiled once, a quiet curve of defiance, and whispered into the wind, "Let them laugh while they can." The storm swallowed his words, and the night pressed closer. Tomorrow, he would show them what humans considered obsolete. Dawn broke reluctantly over Hadian Ridge, its pale light filtered through thick sheets of wind-blown snow. The coalition squad assembled in a staggered line, their breath fogging as they checked power levels and recalibrated their weapons. Mason Hale stood slightly apart from them, scanning the ridge with an expression that wavered between alertness and intuition. The air carried a faint, metallic hum, something easily dismissed by anyone unaccustomed to environments where machines could hide beneath the weather itself. Hale's posture tightened. Instinct whispered that the exercise was about to shift from inconvenience to danger. Captain Lurith signaled the advance, wings tucked tightly against the gusts. The ascent began as a measured climb, boots and talons crunching into frost-packed stone. Hale kept pace without complaint, though several soldiers looked back at him, still amused by the archaic rifle he carried. Trell strode beside him for a moment, his scaled face twisting into a smirk. "If you fall behind," he said, "I will not carry you." Hale didn't bother to respond. His focus remained fixed on the unseen contours ahead, reading the shadows and wind patterns with a veteran's caution. The metallic hum returned, louder this time, and he felt the hairs on his neck lift. He raised a hand, but the warning left his mouth too late. The first drone erupted from behind a jagged outcrop, its plasma emitters glowing a vicious orange. Shots sliced through the air, carving molten scars into the snow. The coalition line scattered in a burst of shouting and panic motion as half a dozen more drones swarmed from the ridge, their movements sharper and more aggressive than anything programmed for training. Trell fired a volley that splashed uselessly across reinforced plating. "These units are malfunctioning," he roared. "Their shields are too strong." Another soldier's sonic rifle sputtered, its coils freezing mid-discharge. The heliosynth officers attempted to coordinate a counterstrike, but their fine-tuned comms crackled with interference. Energy weapons that had survived deserts, jungles, and orbital assaults now flickered under the cold's relentless sabotage. The squad fell into disarray, each alien relying desperately on gear that betrayed them at every critical moment. Hale dropped behind a slab of ice and steadied his rifle. His first shot cracked through the frigid air, a single, sharp report that drew startled glances from the others. The bullet punched cleanly through a drone's sensor cluster, sending it spiraling into the snow. Another round took a second drone behind the joint of its wing assembly, shearing it into smoking fragments. Silence replaced disbelief. Hale moved without theatrics, firing with unhurried precision, each shot carving a path through armor that energy blasts had only scorched. The others regrouped instinctively behind him, galvanized by the sudden appearance of reliability in the chaos. But the drones kept coming. A fresh wave descended from higher ground, their numbers doubling as they adapted to the squad's movements. Hale's rifle cracked again and again, but mechanical limitations gnawed at the rhythm. He felt the barrel heating, the bolts straining, the magazine creeping toward empty. Around him, the aliens braced for a final collapse as the drones tightened their circle. Hale exhaled slowly. "We won't hold this line like this," he said, voice steady even as plasma blasts detonated inches away. "Fall back to my supply case. I've got something that will turn this around." The coalition soldiers hesitated only a moment before instinct overruled pride. They retreated through flurrying snow, Hale covering their movement with the last precious rounds. As the squad reached the lower ridge, Hale slid behind them, eyes bright with resolve that cut through the storm. "Stay close," he said. "You're about to see why humans never rely on elegance alone. Now." Snow churned around the squad as they stumbled into the shallow depression where Hale's supply crate lay half-buried beneath a crust of ice. The drones circled high above, adjusting their formation with calculating menace, their silhouettes flickering like predatory insects behind the storm. Trell gasped for breath, his reptilian chest heaving in agitation, while the heliosynth officers attempted once more to resynchronize their malfunctioning weapons. Every attempt ended in sparks, static, or a frustrated hiss. Hale ignored the turmoil and slammed his gloved fist onto the crate's locking mechanism. The panel flickered, then clicked open with a hollow thud. Inside lay the weapon none of them expected, a monstrous rotary cannon, all steel, angles, and unapologetic weight. Frost clung to its frame like a second skin, but even beneath the ice it radiated an aura of functional brutality. The ammo belt coiled beside it in heavy, gleaming loops, each brass round reflecting the storm's pale light. The squad stared, stunned into silence. "That thing," one heliosynth officer whispered, "is designed for starship dropships. It cannot be operated by a single." "It can," Hale said, dragging the cannon free, "if the operator knows what they're doing." He planted the tripod legs into the snow with sharp, deliberate movements. The weapon sank slightly, but the ground here was packed enough to hold. Trell stepped forward, torn between curiosity and disbelief. "This is excessive, even for humans." "You mean to melt the mountain?" Hale didn't smile. "Only the part trying to kill us." The drones swooped lower, testing the squad's defenses with probing bursts of plasma. Hale ducked instinctively, hooking the ammo belt into the feed port. His movements were swift but controlled. Nothing wasted, nothing uncertain. Lurith watched him with narrowing eyes, recognizing a discipline that transcended species or technology. Hale had not brought relics. He had brought certainty in a form the others had never learned to value. The cannon's motor began to whir, a deep, mechanical growl that vibrated through the snow and into the bones of everyone present. It was an alien sound to them, raw, industrial, utterly devoid of the graceful hum of energy-based armaments. The drones adjusted instantly, reacting to the unfamiliar threat with sudden urgency. "Hale," Lurith murmured, "if this fails, we have nowhere left to retreat." "It won't fail." He braced his stance and settled behind the grips. "Not today." The drones dove. Hale squeezed the trigger. The weapon erupted with a roar that swallowed every other sound, a thunderous cascade of rotating barrels and incandescent tracers. Fire belched from the muzzle in a continuous stream, illuminating the storm in violent orange. Brass casings flew like meteors, clattering across the snow faster than the eye could track. The cannon's fury transformed the frozen battlefield into a furnace of light and metal. Drones shattered under the barrage, their armor peeled apart by relentless kinetic impact. Those that survived the first burst scattered wildly, forced into evasive maneuvers by sheer, overwhelming force. Hale adjusted smoothly, sweeping the line of fire across the ridge with practiced precision. His face remained unreadable behind the goggles, but his entire posture radiated focus sharpened by countless past battles. Behind him, the alien soldiers watched in awe. Their weapons had failed, their training had fractured under pressure, but Hale's archaic monstrosity delivered unbroken dominance. Even Trell, prideful to a fault, lowered his plasma rifle in grudging respect. The second wave of drones attempted to flank them, weaving between outcrops in coordinated formation. Hale pivoted, stabilizing the cannon against the shifting snow. The motor whined louder, pushing against the strain, but the barrels continued their lethal rotation. Another line of drones fell in glittering arcs of debris, their frames dissolving into smoking fragments before they hit the ground. The storm began to quiet. The last drone hesitated, scanners flickering as if reconsidering its directive. Hale gave it no time. One final burst tore through the sky, and the battlefield went silent except for the fading echo of the cannon's roar. Hale released the trigger and stepped back, steam rising from the overheated barrels. The squad exhaled collectively, a sound of disbelief and exhausted relief. Above them, the sky cleared just enough to reveal the pale glow of the twin moons. "We're not finished," Hale said, voice low but steady. The drones weren't acting on training protocols. Something else is driving them. The others stiffened, realization mingling with dread. Hale reloaded the cannon with calm determination. "Stay ready," he said. "Whatever's coming next won't be any easier." The wind settled into a tired whisper as the last fragments of drone debris sizzled into the snow. Hale stood beside the cooling cannon, shoulders rising and falling with controlled breaths. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence, though heavy, was not one of fear anymore. It was the stunned quiet of soldiers reevaluating everything they believed about one another. Lurith stepped forward first, his wings loosening from their rigid tension. The Osari captain surveyed the field, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of steaming metal and scattered brass. "Your actions saved the squad," he said softly, the admission carrying genuine weight. "And your weapon? I underestimated it." Hale shrugged off the praise and knelt beside the cannon, beginning the careful ritual of clearing the feed mechanism. "Technology's only as useful as the conditions it survives," he replied. "Sometimes you need tools that don't freeze, glitch, or demand elegance." His words were not smug, merely pragmatic. Yet they resonated in the frigid air with the force of a doctrine the others had never considered. Trell approached next, his posture conflicted. His pride seemed to argue with the reality before him, but even stubbornness had its limits. "Human," he began, then hesitated. "Your methods are crude, but not without purpose. I misjudged you." Hale looked up, offering a faint nod. "I've been misjudged before. It rarely bothers me." The heliosynth officers drifted closer, their crystalline eyes scanning the remnants of the drones. These units were not following training parameters, one noted. Their behavior was erratic, overly aggressive. Something corrupted their decision matrix. Lurith examined a half-melted sensor module lying at his feet. "We will need to report this anomaly immediately. If other training sites experience similar failures, entire battalions could be at risk." Hale rose and slung his rifle over his shoulder. "Then let's move before the weather worsens." He gestured toward the distant beacon tower, its pale blue light flickering through snowfall. "Extraction should be inbound once they receive our alert." The squad formed up once more, but with a subtle shift in posture. Where earlier there had been skepticism, now there was an unspoken cohesion. The alien stayed closer to Hale without seeming to realize it, as though proximity to him promised stability in a world where their advanced equipment had proven unreliable. Even Trell, who normally marched several paces ahead of any formation, kept himself aligned with Hale's pace. Their trek across the ridge was slower this time, not from fatigue, but from the weight of reflection. Lurith glanced at Hale periodically, as though studying a puzzle he was finally beginning to solve. "Your people built weapons like that cannon for airships, yes?" "Gunships," Hale corrected, "designed to hold back overwhelming numbers. Humans don't always win with finesse. Sometimes we win with persistence and stubbornness," Trell muttered, though without hostility. Hale almost smiled. By the time they reached the beacon tower, the storm had thinned into scattered flakes. The tower's comms panel blinked with incoming messages. Central Command had received fragmented signals from the skirmish and dispatched reinforcements. With the immediate threat behind them, the squad settled into a loose semicircle near the tower's base. One of the heliosynth officers broke the quiet. "Lieutenant Hale, would you consider instructing us in the use of ballistic weaponry? Even basic principles could prevent failure in hostile environments." The others nodded, their expressions earnest. Hale raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think any of you would want to handle something this primitive." Lurith answered for them. "Primitive is not the same as ineffective. Today, prove that." He glanced at the still smoking cannon. "Adaptability is a strength we must learn, not just admire." Hale rested a hand on the cannon's frame. "If you're willing to train seriously, I'll teach you what I can." Relief and resolution settled over the squad. The tension between species had not vanished, but it had shifted into something constructive, a foundation rather than a fault line. The low hum of approaching dropships echoed across the ridge, growing louder as dark silhouettes emerged through the clearing sky. Lurith stepped forward, signaling for the squad to prepare for boarding. Hale lingered a moment longer, taking in the battlefield, the melted snow, the brass casings gleaming like buried sunlight. He exhaled slowly. Not a bad day's work. As the dropships descended, the squad gathered behind him, no longer divided by doubt or superiority. They stood as a unit forged in fire, cold, and recoil, changed, perhaps permanently, by one human and a weapon built for an entirely different war.